Hello there, Force of Will players, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the new spoilers that have been coming out over the past, weekish, I think. I forget when they actually started. I don't remember if it was Monday or, Sunday or something like that. And then I'll be doing these once a week as long as I'm in town. They'll be released on Fridays after we get the Friday spoiler set, and then I'll just be talking about them, my thoughts on them, where we might what the implication for some of them may be, where they might be used, so on and so forth, right? So, getting right on into it, I can zoom this in a little bit. There we go, that should be better. So, anyway, so we got our first spoiler set with Aristella. So, with Aristella and the one right above it, Asuka, they are the structure deck rulers. So, they are part of the new structures that are going to be released. I'm pretty sure they are, because we got another Aristella and I believe another Asuka that do a little bit more. But then some other cards that are going to come in their structures, I believe. And so we see the new mechanic for rulers, sort of. So we see partner 1 Moonchild, which is you can start the game with this ruler and up to 1 Moonchild ruler with Bond, and you put them all in your ruler area. And we'll get into the Moonchilds a little bit later. The non-structure deck versions of Aristella and Asuka have partner 2, so you get 2 Moonchild rulers. So they're kind of expanding on the tag concept, using partner instead, and then they each have this homeland cocoon. At the beginning of the game, you can reveal a cocoon edition you own from outside the game and put it into play, and Aristella and Asuka just have the names of their other counterparts so that you can play abilities and effects with them, right? So, interesting thing about partner, we know from tag that mechanic, in the grand scheme of things, did not pan out super well. In terms of power level, it worked very well because it raised the power level of the game tremendously. But in that sense, because of how powerful the tag rulers were, it eventually just came to a point where they were almost strong enough on their own, and then just having both of them was a little much. So it'll be interesting to see how these new rulers function. We've kind of seen the contracting stuff. I'll get into that when we get to the contracting cards. But the new way of doing judgment, in addition to what the actual Moonchilds do, is not as powerful as the tag rulers were. So even though we technically have a third new ruler, I don't think they're going to be as strong or as prevalent as Six Sage tag and Fallen Angel tag. But time will tell. So moving on, we have Marine of the 12 Sacred Knights. Blue and 2, quick cast. They also bolded keywords, which is nice. You may pay 2 less if you played a God's Art this turn, and then enter if this was played with will produced by a Moon Protection ruler or entity, cancel target, activate, or automatic ability of a Resonator. It's nice that this is moving. We have that ability cancel in blue again. We've had it in green for so long, which is fine to have a thing stuck to a color identity, but giving blue something more is a little bit nicer. The God's Arts effects, it's interesting because this will also be prevalent in things in potentially older decks. The issue with it is because the enter effect requires you to use will made by basically a Moonchild, you're probably not going to play it in old God's Art style decks, because then it would just be a 1 mana for blue quick cast 6/6, and it wouldn't be doing anything else. So it's basically pigeonholed, which is unfortunate, but maybe it sees play elsewhere. Birth of the Twin Princes is a light chant for 1. Quick cast, choose 1, 4C2, then draw a card. So you look at the top 2, put it on the top or bottom, draw. Target J-Res you control gets +4/+4 in barrier, and then up to 1 other target J-Res you control gains +4/+4 in precision. So it's a nice little buff effect. The barrier being on the first one is nice. There's better than if it was the other way around. And then we discover another new mechanic, which is Mastery, which is if you have a recovered card with the name of the Mastery, you can tap that card instead of paying the cost in order to play it for free. So it's a way to play cards for free, which is going to be interesting with some of the stuff we have coming up, because when they first spoiled the Mastery, it looked like it was going to go along the same lines of Force Resonance, where it's kind of just slotted into a single ruler. However, we kind of see that, just moving up here, we can talk about a flash from behind, how this has Mastery Hero, where you recover a hero, ruler, or J Resonator you control. So this has direct synergy with, like, Faria heroes, right? Because all the Resonators in there are heroes, you can rest them with the effect, even if they entered that turn. So you can do something like give your 3 counters to Excalibur Genesis, put Lenneth into play, rest the Lenneth after getting some other hero, and then use a flash from behind. And the other thing is you get, we see it with a flash from behind. There's a bonus if you play it with Mastery as opposed to playing it otherwise, where this gives -2,000 instead, and then you also draw a card, so it also replaces itself. So playing this with Mastery is a lot more prevalent than doing otherwise. So Mastery is an interesting mechanic that we now have. Birth of the Twin Princes, decent card, 4C2 and draw is pretty nice, and then being able to play something like this for free is always good as well. Asuka, we get the same thing as Aristella, Partner 1 Moonchild, Homeland Cocoon, and then the other name. All the rulers themselves basically have nothing related to like their own color identity. I can play a partner Moonchild that's doing like blue and red stuff with Asuka, who's green and darkness. So their color scheme doesn't really have a whole lot to do with what you could potentially do in the deck, which is another interesting thing to run off of. Flashburn behind, again, already very good for heroes and stuff like that. This, with the banning as well of Excalibur Genesis, the combination ban of Excalibur Genesis and Shining Heart, odds are you just move into like a control shell. This is a very good control tool. And maybe just that's like the way Faria Heroes goes. Soul Spirit, you may pay 2 less to play this if there are 7 or more cards in your grave, and then it's like a fog effect. You prevent all damage that would be dealt by target J Resonator your opponent controls, and then when this is put into the grave from the field, you draw a card. It's also quick cast, right? And then it's an 8/8. The interesting thing with this would potentially be Harvesting Season decks, right? Because as soon as you Harvesting Season, you already hit the count. So then any Soul Spirits you would play from then on are already won. Time will tell. Again, the game is fairly fast right now, right? Like with Zeus, Typhon, so on and so forth. So there, unless we see more combination bans, more actual bans, things like that, if they attempt to slow the game down even further, maybe we can see like some fog effects, or you could play this as like a tech option in certain things. We see Aristella here, the non-structure deck version of him. And then we also got our first Moonchild. So all the Moonchilds also have Moon Protection, I'm fairly certain. They have Bond, and then they all have this filter effect. So they filter into 2 colors. So you rest a recovered stone you control, and you produce another color. Very good for certain lineups. It allows you to move into 3 color very easily, because what it allows you to do is if, let's say I'm light blue green, right? If I have mainly light blue sources and then I go into blue green sources, so like I play 4 duels of light blue, 4 duels of green blue, and then 2 of whatever stone, and let's say I call my first stone, I really wanted white on my turn 1, but I don't have that because I hit like my green blue stone. Now with the children I can do that, right? So they function quite well with the filter. We'll see if anyone tries to abuse things like that with like their activated abilities and other stuff. I haven't really looked too hard in the DB, the database, if there are anything that copy activated abilities that you don't have to target the actual like effect or anything. So because this is a will ability, so it wouldn't use the chase at all. And you can't target rulers. So we'll see if this becomes abusable. Otherwise, when they first spoiled like the Child of the Water Moon and the Moon Children, it was like pay 1 into it, which became broken with Heart to Heart Talk. So Rest a Recovered Magic Stone is a better design option. And then we also have contracts. So contracts is the new way that they're deciding to do Judgment. They're double-sided cards, basically, and then you play the contract, and then if you meet a certain condition, you can contract the card with the ruler. You'd have to look at the database. I didn't really go through it. They're like spoiler of like the new mechanics and things. I don't remember if the ruler has to be recovered. If I want to say it doesn't, but it might. But so this condition is if you play a God's Art, you can contract this card with Aristella. And then we see with the Moon Children, they all have a God's Art that's a fairly minor effect. None of the God's Arts, I say, would be as impactful as the Fallen Angel God's Arts. They're pretty generic in the grand scheme of things. Like we see here with Child of the Water Moon, it's just you bounce something, right? You don't draw a card, you don't do anything, you just bounce something. And then you can look over here with Child of the Light Moon, you gain Barrier, and your opponent can only play one spell. I think that's like the best one. But so we see the God's Art. So if you played a God's Art, so we'll see if there are ways to reset it, but basically twice per game, you can contract. And then this is, you can search your deck for a Fairy Tale, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then Fairy Tale Resonators gain +4/+4. So with this, I also need to see if you can contract with something that's astral, or how that actually works. Because if this like doesn't make things astral, that means you get multiple J-Ruler flips. Your ruler can kind of go back and forth, kind of like Order, but actually making your J-Ruler more useful, as opposed to making it a thing where you're just kind of trying to get this mechanic online, like Zeus is flipping back and forth, etc., right? So this might be a way to make J-Rulers more prevalent. The other thing they could do with this is if they make multiple contracts, right? So if you have Contract of the Water Moon, you can also make another card that is another contract with Aristella, but it's a different J-Ruler side. So you can kind of keep it like that. And I find that quite interesting. Kind of already talked about this. You gain Barrier and your opponent may only play one spell. The you gain Barrier is less prevalent, good against like Burn, other random things like discard that targets. But your opponent may only play one spell is very, very powerful. Like exceedingly powerful. Like I think every deck plays this Moonchild powerful. Because it does a couple things. One, it prevents your opponent from potentially going for lethal on their turn. It can slow them down tremendously. Two, it protects your turn. Because you can be like, if you go, I activate this effect, and your opponent tries and cancels it with like a spell or anything, then now you are free to do whatever you want. They can use activated effects, automatic effects, obviously, but they can't play any more cards. So that is quite impactful. Mika's contract, I'm not really going to go over the rulers. They're all the same. They're all partner to Moonchild, and then Homeland Cocoon, right? And then just different colors and different contracts. So 2 4/4 light human resonators into the field, draw a card, and then if a J Resonator you controlled and a J Resonator your opponent controlled were destroyed, you can contract. And then she has precision flying, and then target up to X J Resonators, where X is the number of magic stones you control. Rest those that your opponent controls, and those you control gain +2/+2 in swiftness. So just with Decree, let's say you have 3 stones and your opponent has no board. You flip Messiah, you give Messiah and your 2 tokens +2/+2 in swiftness, and then now you can attack your opponent for 6, 12, plus another 12, 24. So it's effectively 2 mana to deal 24, but you do have to have something be destroyed. 2 things, actually. Something you control and something your opponent controls. So we'll see if there's any form of self-destruction, but they look to be going with like a token thing with this mechanic. And then Vega. So Vega's and Child of the Fire Moon. Child of the Fire Moon has target spell or ability cannot be cancelled or returned to its owner's hand until end of turn. This is the second most powerful one. I have to reread the one from today. We'll show the one from today, even though it's not on here yet. But it's that is also quite a powerful effect. Of Child of the Fire Moon, Child of the Light Moon, and Child of the Water Moon, Water Moon is the weakest so far. But maybe the filtering matters more, right? So the contract is a Manamorphose effect, and then if your life is at 2k or less, you can contract. And then Berserker is it's actually quite an interesting card. It's keyword soup, and then if this card would deal damage to a J Resonator your opponent controls, it deals that much to the J Resonator and the J Ruler's controller, or J Resonator's controller. So you can, if you deal 600 to something, you'll deal 600 to something and 600 to your opponent, With how that works with Pierce, by the way, is since damage is assigned in packets, you can't deal more than something's capacity. So you would effectively always deal 800 or whatever Berserker's attack is. Because if I deal, let's say it's the 6/6, right? I would have to deal 6 to the capacity, I would pierce 200, and then I would deal the damage from his effect. So I would deal 600 from dealing damage to it, and then 200 from the overpierce. So it would still just deal 800. So with Berserker, if something ever blocks you, the block will be you'll just do full damage, right? You'll do whatever Berserker's attack is to your opponent, even if something blocks you, and that is why he's powerful. So if you can do a thing where if you give him plus 200 attack, and then you can recover him over and over again because you can give him Eternal, you can make him recover. You can kill your opponent with 4 attacks. With just the 8/8 stat line, it's 5 attacks. So that is Berserker. And then Extract of the Fire Moon. Manamorphose effects aren't inherently broken, especially if they only produce 2 specific will colors. That means they're even less broken. The thing that was really broken about all the Manamorphose effects we had in the game that recently got hit was because it worked with stuff like Magical Dragon, which had cost reduction in addition to the Manamorphose effects. So when you start bringing in cards and effects where the Manamorphose is itself either gaining you mana in the form of Melfi with Feasting, right? Because Feasting would effectively filter the mana into usable mana. And then you'd play Lycaons, right, with the Perseus, so on and so forth. Or with like Magical Dragon, it's reducing the cost of it, so your magical dragons are just free, and then those give you more stones, right? So like things like that are what make Manamorphose effects broken. However, at their core, Manamorphose effects are not broken. They're fine. They truly don't matter. They just mean that you have to play an extra card in order to, like, I don't know, like you're playing cards to thin your deck, effectively, and deck thinning is fine, conceptually. So we'll see. But when they start getting abused, that's like the issue, right? So like Sudden Manifestation of Power, because there were so many ways to just sack off stones, get new stones, so on and so forth. Like the abuse with that card became too much. But just like produce will effects, just raw produce will. Melfi, right? Has anybody played Melfi since Feasting got banned? No, we haven't seen it like anywhere. The only decks we really saw it in were the Magical Dragon decks, and that's because it counts as a chant. And I don't even know how many people were playing it, like at the time. But like now, right, with like Zeus and Typhon and those just like being the better decks, no one's playing Melfi. It just doesn't matter. No one's playing... I doubt anybody is going to play Extract. We've had, technically, a Manamorphose since like the game's inception in the form of Rewriting Laws. And how many decks played Rewriting Laws? There were some back in the day because it was a 0 mana cantrip, but like it doesn't do anything, right? So those are all those, and then lastly, I will go to the Force of Will Discord, and we'll take a look at those cards. Let me pull them over to the screen here. So we have Falchion, so green blue. We have this Moonchild, which is cancel target spell that was played without paying any will other than additional costs. The wording on that's really weird. Without paying any will other than additional costs? So I'm super confused by this, because how this is worded to me, I'll have to ask about this. I haven't talked with anybody about this card yet or seen what people are saying, but the way this is worded to me is you can't cancel anything, because there's no card that you can play without paying will, right? So I should rephrase that, right? So if I play Virgil being played is not an additional cost. I'm like 90% sure. Like we can, like, here we'll look up Virgil. Virgil is, rather than pay this card's cost, right? So like you're not paying the cost when you do an alternate cost, which means what Child of the Wind Moon is supposed to do is cancel cards that are played via alternate costs. It doesn't do that, because it says any will other than additional costs. But if you put will into the card to play it for its normal cost, you've already put will into it, right? This card is worded really bad. I'll have to ask some people I know about it and see what they're saying. But the way this is worded for me just seems like incorrect. If this is supposed to be cannot like cancel spell that was played without paying any will like other than an alternate cost or something like that. So like Virgil, right, where it's like you can sack your J ruler instead of paying this card's cost. Like that makes more sense. If that is the case of what it is, card's okay, prevents your opponent from cheating stuff out, right? Like Virgil or other things like that. I don't know how many effects we currently have in the meta that are like that though. Not a lot. So this is pretty like meta dependent if it's like that. Otherwise, I'll reread this. My next week's video, I'll re-clarify like what it is going over basically. And then the contract, we have draw 2. You can put an addition with total cost 1 or less from your hand into the field if you control 3 or more additions. So this guy's all about additions. That's kind of neat. I can see this being played in like a fair bit of decks. Even just like as is, right? Like draw 2, you get a free addition. Maybe some decks play it. Like you would play it if Lycion was still around, but and then Justice. This card gains Eternal and Barrier as long as it's recovered. It's kind of cool. Whenever you play a chant, if it was the first chant you played, recover this card. Interesting. Okay. If it was the second chant, put 4+1/+1 counters. If it was the third chant, recover up to 2 stones. If it was the fourth chant you played, cancel any number of target spells and/or activate or automatic abilities. So this is where Manamorphose effects start to get out of hand, right? Because with this, if I have 4 Melfies, I can just get all of these effects. So like this is the concept of Manamorphose effects getting out of hand. Hitting the fourth chant thing might be kind of hard. I'd have to see on that. Because again, like that would be like Manamorphose territory. So like you would play 4 Melfi in this deck. And then it would be like more additions and like other things like that. This guy seems kind of interesting, not gonna lie, because his condition seems fairly easy to hit with just it being 3 or more additions, because there are plenty of additions you can play. They're just not all great. But if you're playing things like put free additions into play and like other things like that, excuse me, and you start the game with an addition in the form of the Cocoon, right? It's like you only need to put 2 more in, and this puts 1 in. So you'd have to put, if you have a 1 mana addition, you can play 1 addition on 1, you have the Cocoon, and then you play this on 2, put another addition in, and then you contract on turn 2. Which I mean seems pretty decent. So I just have to see. But that Justice seems like the most interesting of them so far. I did not mean to hit YouTube. Justice seems the most interesting of them so far. I mean, you would want to play like Extract or Manamorphose effects in that deck, even though they're not in color. You have Filter. And then also because Child of the Fire Moon just has target spell or ability can't be canceled. That works well with Justice. And Child of the Light Moon works well with Justice. So this kind of you want the light red darkness Moonchilds, even though you're green blue. So that might change how the deck is made, but we'll see. That's kind of funny that they did it like that. But yeah, so interesting concepts for what we have coming out, and we'll see more of the cards as they get spoiled. We'll see what the power level of the set is designed to be and what they want. The other thing is that bans might also happen, combination bans, things, other stuff like that, that might lower the power level of the game down to what these cards are as well. But and also I really like the card art that they've gone with, especially for the rulers. Like I really like Mika's art, I really like Viga's art. That like darker, kind of less anime-ish art, but I like anime art too. So. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Again, there'll be another one of these next Friday. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.